Hello, my name is Krystal Hazlett, and I am the SAKI Site Coordinator for the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. This is Cold Case Sexual Assault for Utah Sexual Assault Kit Initiative webinar. So starting out, we'd like to talk about unsubmitted sexual assault kits. Any sexual assault kit received by law enforcement prior to March 22nd, 2015 that is connected to a reported sexual assault and was not submitted to the lab for testing regardless of the reason the sexual assault kit was not originally submitted to the lab. We consider these unsubmitted sexual assault kits. In 2016, SAKI inventoried unsubmitted sexual assault kits. The inventory found that 1,751 kits were located in Salt Lake County. We have not completed a statewide certified inventory. We do estimate that to be 2,700 kits. To help clear the backlog of unsubmitted sexual assault kits, we receive funding from 3 different sources to address those unsubmitted kits. The state of Utah committed $750,000. The NIJ, or the FBI, is also testing kits, and that is 30 kits per agency. And then the state of Utah received a federal grant for $1.3 million, and that is considered DANI funding. DANI is the District Attorney's Office of New York. We received a federal grant to help complete our backlog. Everyone, please turn in your unsubmitted sexual assault kits. Those kits are then run through DNA testing. The DNA testing then produces CODIS eligible, and then there may also be a CODIS hit. Those DNA profiles are ran against other DNA profiles in CODIS, and that may produce potential suspects. This funding is testing all kits, except for those that are restricted. A restricted kit is where a victim has identified that she does not want to report that to law enforcement. Those kits will not be submitted. Once we receive DNA testing results, all of that goes to the law enforcement agencies. Now that we have tested all of this, now what do we do next? These are some of the considerations that we look at when considering to reopen a case. Do we start reopening cases? Do you start contacting victims? Which victims do you contact? How do you decide? How do you find victims? What are the best practices for victim notification, which we will discuss later on in this webinar? Who should be involved? What do you need to consider? And what do the victims need? These are all considerations that SAKI is looking at. In 2015, we received funding from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and it is a 3-year pilot project that we are looking at in Salt Lake County to address those 1,751 kits. SAKI understands that we need to come together to look at all of these cases. From BJA funding, we are funding a site coordinator at the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, and that is my position as the site coordinator. We are teamed with the Department of Public Safety, the State Bureau of Investigations. We employ 1 investigator, Agent Steve O'Cam, and we employ a victim advocate, Lauren DeVries. The Department of Public Safety also is funded through SAKI to determine on CODIS eligibility, and we will also be creating a sexual assault tracking system. The Utah Office of Victims of Crime has helped us create a victim therapeutic treatment fund. We are also working with the 11 local law enforcement agencies in Salt Lake County and have provided additional funding for their investigation as well as training. The Crime Victims Legal Clinic is also a SAKI funded position. We will also be hiring a victim rights attorney. The University of Utah Dr. Heather Melton is providing our program evaluation. Some of the research that SAKI uses is Dr. Campbell's Neurobiology of Trauma, or Trauma Informed, the Joyful Heart Foundation, and the Detroit Sexual Assault Kit Action Research Project. We use all of this research to help us move forward with SAKI. What we have discovered is that we have put together a multidisciplinary team to look at all of these cases. We've created a case review team. On that case review team, we have an investigator, victim advocate, forensic nurse, forensic scientist, and a prosecutor. We do recommend that we use multidisciplinary teams or your SART to decide if and how the investigation and prosecution should proceed. The case review expectations. When going into a case review, we want to make sure that everybody in the multidisciplinary team signs a confidentiality agreement. We understand that it's non-judgmental feedback. We use the multidisciplinary roundtable. We discuss each case for potential reactivation. And then we give feedback and recommendation to the law enforcement agency and prosecuting attorneys. Before a case review takes place, we do ask the investigator to review the case file, review all the evidence, review the suspect's criminal history, and attempt to locate current contact information for the victim, suspects, and witnesses. SAKI's goals and objectives. The reason why we are doing these case reviews and looking at all of these cases within Salt Lake County is we would like to offer investigation and prosecution support for cold case sexual assaults. We want to establish cold case protocols or best practices. We are trying to identify trends associated with the sexual assault kit accumulation. We would like to identify system gaps and needs and improve the overall response to rape and sexual assault by implementing victim-centered and trauma-informed best practices.
Okay, so we're now going to transition to talking about the victim notification and about some of the best practices. And just to introduce myself, my name is Lauren DeVries, and I am the SAKI victim advocate, and like Krystal mentioned, with the Department of Public Safety, housed at the State Bureau of Investigations, or SBI. So Salt Lake County created a victim notification protocol. A committee of law enforcement, victim advocates, the DA's office met over several months to create the best practices for Salt Lake County when notifying victims of these cold cases. The protocol that they created is 10 pages long. It's very thorough. And for anyone who wants a copy, feel free to send me an email that I've listed on the PowerPoint. We've also created kind of a condensed version of that protocol if you'd like a copy of that as well. But up here is just showing you kind of what our first page looks like on that Salt Lake County victim notification protocol. And I know that Krystal went over this, but I just also wanted to note that in our Salt Lake County protocol, it comes directly, the best practices comes directly from research that has been done on sexual assault cold case victim notification, and specifically notifications where there was a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit. So there's been some research that's been done and definitely created some of the best practices to follow with victim notification. So I first want to emphasize that with re-engaging these victims, that it may cause re-traumatization, particularly because of the significant time lapse, and that we're bringing back traumatic memories and feelings for a lot of these victims and survivors. Many of them may have moved on in their life, and then we're coming back with this new information. And another reason is just the fact that they actually had a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit. That kind of makes this victim notification even more unique than just a cold case without a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit. Many victims may assume that their kit was submitted and may be surprised or confused on why now we're testing or why now we're looking at their cases. And just have a couple quotes here from both Joyful Heart Foundation talking about the significant time lapse, and then also another quote from the National Institute of Justice just saying that victims may experience a wide range of emotions and reactions to notifications. Feelings and memories regarding the assault may cause re-traumatization, flashbacks, and other symptoms that heighten post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues or affect substance use or abuse. So with that being said, we feel that we have a responsibility to conduct notifications in a way that avoids compounding trauma for survivors impacted by the previously unsubmitted sexual assault kits. So that really is the goal of the Salt Lake County Victim Notification Protocol, is to reduce re-traumatization, but also prepare notifiers who will be doing the notifications in trauma-informed and victim-centered best practices for those notifications. So with victim notification, where to start? It is suggested that prior to notification, a case should go through the SAKI case review process, which was mentioned earlier. Case reviews are not only to assess a case's ability to be investigated and prosecuted, but also what recommendations that SAKI case review has for victim notifications. It's important to have that input from all disciplines when making decisions on when, how, and who to notify. The Salt Lake Victim Notification Protocol is only recommending notifying victims when their case has a potential for prosecution. However, the team considers each case individually and may give recommendations to notify a victim when there is no potential for prosecution on a case-by-case basis, which is why it's so important to have that multidisciplinary team, that SAKI case review team, to make those case-by-case decisions. Although we've created that gold standard of only notifying victims when there's a potential for prosecution, we still are considering cases on a case-by-case basis. So after you've had that SAKI case review and the team has made those recommendations to move forward with a victim notification, we want to make every attempt to notify a victim in a safe and private manner. We're re-engaging victims years later and bringing back those traumatic memories, and it's already somewhat an invasion of privacy. So certain considerations should be discussed, and we would recommend with both the victim advocate and the investigator that would be doing and completing that victim notification. And again, we would recommend the victim advocate and the investigator with the agency that's investigating the case make that notification together. So some things to consider is that first, we recommend and it's suggested that the victim should be notified in a timely manner and before proceeding with the investigation. We don't want the victim to find out their case is being looked into or that their kit was tested from anyone but the law enforcement agency. So we don't want any contact to be made with witnesses or suspects or any other interviews to be done until that victim has been notified and that victim has made the decision that they would like to engage in the process and would like to move forward with their case. We also want law enforcement to consider, and victim advocates, what the victim's current life circumstances are. How could the notification possibly affect the victim? What is the relationship between the victim and suspect? Are they still living together? Does their case involve domestic violence? Does there require specific safety precautions or safety plans for that victim when notifying? Considering who else may be present during the notification, just keeping in mind that some victims may not have told anyone about the assault, including spouses or children or family or friends that could be around at the time of notification. What will you wear during notification? Arriving in a uniform and marked police car may impact a victim's privacy. However, it may also raise safety concerns for law enforcement. So again, these are things that we'd want to be discussed between the victim advocate and investigator. Continuing on, some other things is to consider what information can and cannot be relayed to the victim at that time of notification. Research does suggest that it's important to provide as much information to the victim as possible. So here's some examples of things that you may want to be prepared with. What the test results are and what that means. A victim may want more explanation into what a CODIS hit is, or verification, or a DNA eligible profile, what those things mean, whether the survivor is safe, where the perpetrator may be currently, the next steps and possible outcomes of their case. And then most victims do ask why their kit was not submitted originally. So we did give an example of something that could be said to a victim on a notification, just focusing on, the things that we're doing now to make changes. We now know so much more about the benefits of testing kits. As a result, our department has adopted a policy to test all sexual assault kits and is working to train all officers about trauma and how it affects victims. And it could also be mentioned the passing of HB 200 in the last legislative session, mandating the testing of all sexual assault kits, just really showing that we're making efforts as a community and as a state to make changes to make sure that a backlog never does happen again. We also mentioned in our protocol in Salt Lake County that this was a system-wide breakdown. It's not just one discipline that is at fault for the backlog, but helping them understand that, it was all disciplines. It was a lack of funding. It was really a system-wide breakdown. The other thing that we would recommend when considering what information to give the victim is just offering an apology. Just a simple, "I'm sorry that this happened to you," can really go a long way for victims, and just knowing that we really do care and are committed to their case and making changes in the future. So then we've kind of talked about prior to notification, the case review, talking about making some of those considerations, but then actually how to do the notification is pretty important as well. Really, face-to-face notifications are recommended and widely best practice. In-person notifications are more personable and lay a foundation for victim-centered relationships. So really, we want these notifications on these previously unsubmitted sexual assault kits to be in person. And here I've listed some testimonials from victims that did receive a victim notification from a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit. This was research done by Joyful Heart Foundation. The first one, I definitely preferred the in-person contact. I think if I got a letter or a phone call, I would have just thought I was being checked off a long list. This way I felt special. The other one, with face-to-face, you will know how the person handles the information and can offer support then and there. And I think that last testimonial really shows the importance of having victim advocates on those notifications and being present to offer those services to these victims, and that to reduce that possible re-traumatization that may occur. So there's been two types of face-to-face notifications that have been brought up. That would be a scheduled or an unscheduled. Both a scheduled and unscheduled notification can result in successful victim-centered and trauma-informed notifications. Here in Salt Lake County, we've had successful notifications with both. Basically, one is where you would just be showing up at a victim's home and notifying them. Scheduled would be calling them over the phone and setting up a time to meet with them. And if your agency or if decides that they would like to schedule the in-person notification, we would just recommend calling and just saying that you are calling about a case from whatever year and you've received additional information, would like to speak with them in person. And again, we would really encourage that decision of scheduled versus unscheduled be assessed by the victim advocate and investigator completing that notification. So here's some other notification methods that sometimes will be needed, but are less desirable. There's telephone notifications, a notification via mail. We would really emphasize that if a mail notification was being done, that it be a very generic letter, similar to the phone call saying, we've received additional information about your case. And we would like you to contact this person, but, really leaving out anything about sex crimes or a sex crime detective, keeping it very, very generic. Also, email notification. And I think it's important to note that if an email is not acknowledged or returned, that continued contact or efforts for another form of notification happens. So this is a question that's come up. When should the victim be re-interviewed? And some have asked, is the notification a time and place for that? It's really important that following the victim's lead during notification, really letting them decide how that goes. It isn't recommended that the notification is the best time to re-interview. However, there are some circumstances where victims do want to proceed with interview, but probably err on the side of caution that victims may need time to process new information before deciding how they'd like to engage in the process. So unless a victim really does want to be re-interviewed at that time, giving them some time to process before doing that. And so just talking about the advocate's role a little bit in notification, it is suggested that the advocate who participates in the SAKI case reviews be the one who'd be notifying on the case, and then obviously participate in that victim notifications. And then obviously assess needs and connect victims to community resources when completing that notification, safety and privacy plans with the victim, make sure the victim knows about their rights, and let them know you are available for support and ongoing advocacy services as the case progresses. Advocates across the state of Utah should know that the Utah Office for Victims of Crime is coordinating and working with SAKI. First, they're actually extending or reopening CVR claims that was past the 3 years for cases specifically with a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit. So those victims can access treatment funds. However, if a victim used all of their treatment funds at the time that they had that CVR claim, we also have a SAKI treatment fund to kind of fill those gaps, so that really we're able to provide every victim with a previously unsubmitted sexual assault kit an opportunity to have access to treatment funds if they do want additional treatment. And if victim advocates would like more information on that, they can also email me and I can give them the information. So I also just wanted to touch on the sexual assault kit information line. Because we are only recommending notifying on certain cases and sometimes on a case-by-case basis, SAKI has created a sexual assault kit victim information line. This gives all victims with a previously backlogged kit or unsubmitted kit an opportunity to find out what results come from or may come from testing. It's also available for victims to opt out of receiving any notifications on their kit. Some victims may not want to be involved in the process. So if they don't want to be contacted, if they don't want to re-engage in the process, they can call that information line. And law enforcement agencies should also know that they will be notified of any victim that calls with a case from their agency or jurisdiction. So if a victim calls and opts out of notification, that's something that I would be coordinating with that law enforcement agency as I'm running the information line. Let them know, hey, this victim's opting out and would not like further contact or information on their case. But also if a victim calls wanting an update, wanting to know what happened to their kit, wanting to know if it was part of the backlog and if it's been sent in for testing, I'll also be coordinating with the law enforcement agency and really initiating them to contact the victim. I won't be releasing that information to the victim, but really giving that back to law enforcement to make sure they give that update and information to the victim. And here's my information. And if anyone has any questions or would like to call me, I'd be happy to answer those, and would really encourage questions to be asked, and for communities to kind of rally together and figure out what's going to be the best process for their victim notification.